right, everybody, welcome to the Administrative Committee. Today, August 26th. We have the first thing on our agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes from July 22nd.
So I've been locked out of my email,
Uh-oh.
but I know how well Lori Hopkins takes minutes, and I feel secure in that if my counselors feel secure in that.
I do.
I didn't see anything wrong with them. Okay. Next on the agenda is the why do you guys do this? I can't say it. The Moscow version of Oktoberfest, alcohol use request in entertainment district. Moscoberfest.
There you go. You got it.
I got it? Okay.
My name is Laura Perigo with the Community Events Division. I'm here to present the fourth annual Moscoberfest that the Moscow Chamber will be putting on, and they are requesting approval of the resolution to temporarily suspend the open container law during the event within the footprint, which is taking place September 28th from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Main Street between 3rd and 6th Street. This event is based off, of course, Oktoberfest, which is in the spirit of fall folk festivals. The applicant is anticipating no more than 15 licensed beer and or wine vendors. And I believe there's currently 9 that's scheduled, I believe. Yeah, right. Okay, I got the nod. And they're also going to be around up to 15 food vendors, and then of course 15 vendors having with street games and activities. Yes, we're very excited to see that as well. Yeah, so some of the activities include children's crafts, rubber ninja throwing stars, stein holding, keg lifting, maybe knitting, spinning, maybe a terracotta would be there. They might have a
You're gonna throw some clay.
a demonstration throwing clay. I think that's really cool. So, and then, I would like you guys to hopefully review and recommend to be moved to City Council for approval.
You haven't
Perfect.
extended
If you have any
any boundaries or anything. We're not like going around another
It's-
street, just same old, same old.
Same footprint
Great.
as previous years. They'll be taking, so the official streets we close will be, of course, Main Street, 3rd through 6th Street, 5th Street up to the alley where the Moscow Co-op is. And then we also close down the first bay, the Jackson Street parking lot, to allow access to the public restrooms.
Good.
Yes. And then there'll also be, they'll be bringing in some other porta potties, such on 5th Street and on the first bay as well as extra facilities. Yeah.
And did I miss? Is there music too? Did I miss
And
that?
there will be live
Okay, cool.
music as
Awesome.
well in Friendship Square.
Great. I've enjoyed this the last 4 years. I'm hoping we can enjoy another one.
I have no
Questions?
comments. Nope.
Okay.
I move to approve.
Yep, put on
We do
Wait,
consent.
consent?
consent.
Great.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you so
Thank you.
much.
Nice.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the state and local agreement for construction of the Public Avenue Corridor Safety Improvements. Scott and Alyssa.
Good afternoon.
Hello.
Okay, we're bringing before you today a state local agreement, but first I'll give you a little bit of history on the project. We originally applied for this grant back in 2019. We had applied for the whole street from Orchard to Polk, and then they came back to us and said that's going to cost way too much. So they asked us to size it down to Lincoln, which is where we had a fatality accident between Lincoln and Polk on Public, which was one of the unfortunately reasons why we qualified for the grant, the traffic statistics under the LSIP program. So just a little bit of history too. The Local Highway Technical Assistance Council manages the LSIP, Local Highway Safety Improvement Program for ITD. So we submit the applications and work directly with them. We originally received a notice of award back in April of 2019, and it was for $880,000. And at that point in time, the match was at the rate of 7.34, which was approximately 64,592. And excuse me, total projects were 880,000. Grant funds of 815,408, and then the match of 64,592. At that time, the project was scheduled for design in 21 and then construction in 2022, but we know that there was a gap in everything at that point in time. In 20, then they were finally able to get us a state local agreement to award project design and development. And then they procured and had a local professional services agreement executed in September of 21. So the design process has really been moving forward since then. There's been some delays. We had different things. We didn't anticipate needing to have an easement originally. But then once they did the surveying on the road, realized things were a little bit skewed from what we had thought. So there was some right-of-way purchased, different things like that. And the project was upgraded as the design went through. And now Scott's going to kind of go over with you what the project has developed into, and then we'll kind of move forward with where we are now.
Yeah. So we've kind of already touched location-wise in Moscow where this is at. Just up here between Lincoln and Polk on Public Avenue, and where its location is in general to other school facilities and other places that people are going to be using the pedestrian access, walking through. Some rough ideas of what's out there right now. It's approximately 1,100 foot corridor. Right now it's 12-foot lanes out there with 1-foot shoulders, and then it's just ditch lines on the sides for stormwater right now. Really not good area for people to be able to walk and bike through it. So back when we had applied, this was an area that we had the high number of Angle Road departure crashes, kind of same thing. Really not great for pedestrian facilities out there.
I totally rolled down that once.
Yeah.
Angle Road Departure, what did you call them? Angled Road Departure
Not making the
incidents?
curve, the corridor.
So as part of this project, what we're going to do essentially is we're filling in the ditch lines. The roadway is growing out from there. We're going to add the bike lanes, curb gutter sidewalk, green strips, turn it more to an urban type section through the corridor. And then we're also realigning the intersection at Polk and Public, adding a concrete island there to assist with the turn movement. And we're also making modification to F and Public to align that better as well, instead of having that as a skew intersection where you have to look way over your shoulder to see. And I only took just a snippet of the plan set. We've got a full plan set they've designed, but this is just the portion here from Polk to F Street on Public Avenue. Polk on the left here, F Street over here on the right. And here's kind of a picture of like the splitter island that's being added. And then just rough of the roadway section, the drive lanes, the bike lanes, and the curb gutter and sidewalk on each side. But yeah, and then a full storm system instead of the ditch lines out there right now. The existing storm system that's in pieces in various areas is a mismatch of all kinds of random stuff over the past 100 years.
Mhm.
So everything's going to be brought into the road so that we can expand the roadway itself.
And it'll go to Lincoln. So after Lincoln, the bike lanes will go away. Is that right?
Yeah, that'll be a future phase to the project. And that was part of when we had originally applied. It was going all the way up to Orchard to make the connection, but it was just too much money at the time.
So in your packet, you have a state local agreement. And since we put this item on the agenda, we've been speaking with LTAC in hopes to reduce the match that they had requested in the agreement. And today we had a meeting, Scott and I had a meeting with them, and they've agreed to allow us to, they're working on it right now and hoping to have a new agreement for us, get it down to where the city's match would not exceed 400,000. And that may mean that once it goes out to bid, we may have to put some additional money down again, more, but our hope is, Scott's been reviewing it, and we think that there are some things that can be maybe reduced.
Yeah, the difference between what the design professional had estimated versus what LTAC had felt their numbers are coming in out of the projects they've been seeing was almost a $400,000 difference. So LTAC playing the conservative side raised everything way up. So
Oh.
we were just asking them, can we lower it back down to more what the design professional was feeling? And we're taking the risk then of putting it out to bid, but we feel like that's going to be closer to what things may truly come in at, as opposed to us fronting the money ahead of time and then having to wait for reimbursement later.
So we didn't receive this agreement till last week. And we'd been waiting for a while for it. Design was completed about 8 weeks ago, I think it was.
Yeah, with some minor revisions that they had found.
And then we found out when we began speaking with them last week that in order for them to request their federal allocation funding through ITD, everything has to be completed and in their office by next Friday. And so the hope is right now they've committed to updating the state local agreement. We're hoping to have it before the packet goes out on Friday or Thursday.
Mhm.
If not, we may have to hand it to you with reduced numbers at the city council meeting. But I think Bill will kind of talk to you a little bit more about the process, how he
Okay.
wants that to look.
And if you can recall, think back to the to the budget workshop in July. We had anticipated this project. I mean, it's been obviously since we applied in 2019. But we were not aware of the substantial increase in local match requirements, going from 64,000 to 699,000. What we had prepared in the FY25 budget was a little over 100,000 because we knew the match had grown beyond the 64,000, but we were a bit surprised to see the most recent number when this contract came through. Scott and Lisa had conversations with LTAC looking at various options of not proceeding with the project. What would that look like? The answer to that was we'd have to reimburse LTAC for $180,000 of design fees above and beyond what we've already contributed towards design the project so far. We looked at options of potentially phasing it, but the project is really small enough that it doesn't make a lot of sense to phase it. Really, the third option, which is what we're going to be pursuing, is looking at trying to reduce that local match amount because we feel their estimates were higher than what we see in our local market. The challenge for us with these types of projects is we have to write them the check before it moves forward and into the federal aid process and into the bid process. And if it comes in lower, we don't see that money oftentimes for 2 years till the project gets through full construction. So if we provide 700,000 local match, they really only needed 300 of it. That 400 will sit in their hands for about 2 years until the project gets closed out. They do their final accounting and then they reimburse back any excess funds. So our goal was, one, to try to get the match back to what we think it really will be. And then two, reduce anything that would be held in their hands for an additional 2 years that we could, that we need for other projects right now. So I think this path of trying to work down to what the engineer record actually thought the construction cost would be to get that number down to what we think it's likely to be in the market when it comes to bid is going to be our best path. If we land at about a $400,000 match, there is substantial storm utility work here, so the storm utility could support some of that capital expense. And then we will likely have to find another 200,000 or so out of the general fund capital projects, which we do have a ending fund balance that could be taken from. So that'll be something we may have to address during the open budget for the upcoming fiscal year.
If all these ducks line up
Yeah.
and we get through this process, it would be go out to bid this fall, and then construction would be scheduled for next summer.
Sorry, explain to me again how we went from $64,000 to $600,000 and back to 400,000. I mean, I get how we went back to 400,000, but how do we get from 64,000 to 600,000?
A few different things.
Okay.
One, when it was originally scoped, it was prior to COVID. The construction rates on a lot of things have escalated a lot since then. I mean,
Like 35%.
yeah.
That's 90,000.
On top of that, there's also an expansion in scope too, which they have supported. And that was going from a project that was more of a widening, just to add curb gutter sidewalk and everything, not really taking into account how much major change would have to happen with the storm system.
Oh.
The original design just had some minor stuff. As you get in design, you kind of figure, well, certain stuff has to reconnect so things grow from there. So that's adds cost, but certain items too, like asphalt, has gone through the roof for the cost of it. So
And they have contributed from the original 7.34, from the original project amount, they've added an additional 600,000 in grant funds. And we just happened to be in the right time at the right place that they had that many available. And if we move, wait and not do the project for a couple years, we may not see that money be available again. So that's another factor in looking at trying to make it work now, is we may not receive that in the future, and it would be a greatly reduced scope if we did move forward.
This is just one of those, I mean, I get it, totally get it. And for the most part, most part, I'm in favor, but man, it feels weird.
The
Right?
original roadway, I mean, we've called it a reconstruction, not just a, there's
Yes.
been a lot added to the
Oh.
roadway
Yeah, the
improvements.
scope has changed from more of a safety related project with some stuff to more of a rebuild of the whole urban section.
I mean, that road is really an anomaly in
It's
town.
awful,
It's
yeah.
really not a great place to walk.
Yeah, these are those historical county roads that then get annexed into the city and were never developed to a city standard. And so we were left trying to, like Mountain View, improve them over many
Right.
decades. So this happens to be one of those, and it just the scope change and the market change just really has driven that cost up.
Well, as someone
Which-
who, oh, sorry, go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, no, which now if they are developing roads in the county that are in the area of impact, they have to meet city requirements.
We make that recommendation, but the county doesn't impose that condition very often because the county doesn't feel, since the highway district does roadways, the county government does not. The county government does the entitlement process. And so we have made multiple recommendations on development around the city that they be held to the same city standards for development roadway improvements. And historically, they've declined to do so because they feel that they don't have, the county government itself doesn't have jurisdiction over roadways. Only the highway district does, and the highway district does not maintain roads of that standard. The highway district doesn't want curbs for their plows, these in unusual locations. And so it is a bit of a difficult situation when we encounter these old roadways.
Can we have an IOU legally?
I wish we did. We will continue to make the recommendation that they improve the roadways to our standards, require curbing and walks so that we don't have to make that investment in the future when they're annexed. But we have not been successful yet.
Thanks for reminding me of,
And as the AD coordinator, I will share that, we had a previous LSIP project on Public or on Polk. And there'll be a crosswalk that will connect from this project.
Good.
And so we'll have a sidewalk, curb, gutter, bike lane up to F Street, which will connect then to that sidewalk. And so that will provide that safe pedestrian access for the kids. Some ride the bus, but not a lot of them. They like to walk to school from there. So we'll have, providing a safe corridor all the way up to the top of where Mountain View where F Street and Hayes meet. So
That's amazing to me. I used to take that road multiple times a day when I worked out at PCEI, and I was always dodging kids on bikes, and not because they were being
Right.
dumb, right?
well, back then there wasn't a sidewalk.
There was no
either.
sidewalk and there was no crosswalks, and I've actually walked that before and literally had to scooch over and
Ditch.
rolled into the ditch physically, like not in a
Pushing
car.
one.
When I say a roll, I mean it was like stop, drop, and roll in second grade fire training, right? So, I mean, I like that. It's just, gosh, it's a weird process, but I get that everything is weird sometimes. So, knowing how awful that area is, I'm excited to see it improved. I can't believe happily there haven't been more fatalities there in the last 5 years, right? It's a wicked spot to me. So if it makes sense to us in that weird way, I'm good.
Yeah, honestly, at this stage of the project, what we've invested in time so far, to have to identify another 300,000 to fill above and beyond what we budgeted for, 1.2 or more in federal funding to the project, it's probably in our best interest to proceed. And that's ultimately what we concluded after reviewing it. We just wanted to try to reduce that match to what we hoped was more consistent with what we think the project will end up costing, and then not have excess funds held by the state for 2 years.
Right. Okay.
I'm on board with what everything you're saying. I just have a couple clarifying questions because this is kind of my hood of Moscow. I live close to this area,
I used to too.
yeah, and so especially getting people up to Orchard or F. I mean,
Mhm.
I don't think people realize unless you live in that neighborhood how heavily
Yeah.
like the pedestrian traffic.
Mhm.
It's significant, and lots of people will benefit because they're getting up to the park. a variety of ways of connecting neighborhoods, which that's in our purview as the city. But the thing I was out of service till yesterday, like at 9 o'clock at night. So I was trying to look on my phone. I wasn't driving, someone else was, but for the record, but,
Thank you.
but we're talking about street safety. But so I was looking at the packet, and so how far? So we have a north and south side of Public. It's only going up to F Street on the south side. No,
So it's
going
connecting to F
F Street.
Street.
Okay,
Mhm.
and then how far on the north side? Because we're not connecting to Orchard.
No, but everything, the curb gutter sidewalk, everything's going up to Lincoln. Actually, just a little past Lincoln on the north side,
Because I was just looking at my map on my phone. Okay.
which is about halfway. up
Yeah,
Orchard.
halfway. Okay,
Yeah.
halfway between it. And initially, too, from what I remember, this could be Drew making up things in his head, but we were trying to get to Orchard, correct? But
There's
it's
just a little piece of sidewalk where the Peachtree
Mhm.
subdivision is, and then we're still missing a little bit on both ends.
yeah, on both ends.
Yeah.
And because I know just talking to people and that being kind of my neighborhood,
Mhm.
whatever we want to call it, that's like a really big important thing. And so for me, the only question I have, since we are making those improvements, and again, Scott, if you can help me understand, so we're fixing what's going underneath, like the ditch, but basically from Lincoln, how is that being resolved? Because it's basically being handled the same way. So it's all filter, like from a civil engineering perspective, how does
Stormwater.
what's changing? Because we're going underground, but we still have stuff above ground. Like,
So as we go east from there, for the most part, everything is piped past that. It was
Oh, it
to-
is?
It was to
Okay.
the west that everything opened up into the ditch lines.
okay, so basically you're just tying into existing infrastructure, taking it to, okay.
Yeah.
And is that going to help by connecting it to the west on getting it on Polk? That's going to help significantly with
Yeah,
load,
and this would
right?
help to significantly capture the entire neighborhood to the southeast as well, almost from the
Right.
water tower coming down, which is going to be a future capital project coming up as well. And without this improvement, it's going to be harder to make that connection in the future as well.
Yeah.
Because there's currently a spider web of pipes that's pretty much cutting through houses. I mean, that are all
It's
just
a
completely torn
little-
apart. And
Yeah.
we're trying to get rid of all this infrastructure where some of that pipe, there's no bottom in it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Getting new pipe too is
Yeah.
also a thing. Getting rid of the spiderweb pipe. I get it. For me, I know this is something that we talk about a lot. I talk to people a lot, and or have not recently. And I appreciate both of your time. I mean, I'm excited about it. It's awesome. I think it's something important enough to just talk about during council, because we'll have more people hopefully listening in, just to talk about regular consent.
Regular agenda?
And that'd be fine.
But we do want to improve it.
Since the
Yeah.
The timeline for you might be weird.
Correct. The timing, we're going to try to ask the state to have a state local agreement by Thursday, if possible, to get in the packet. But I don't know that that's going to be feasible. We may not get it until Tuesday, which we can
Which is fine,
provide
yeah.
to the council. We
Yeah.
can cover it. It's just changing the numbers and reducing that match contribution, hopefully down to that 400,000. We hope to get it to. We can certainly present that. And if you want to have it on regular agenda, that'd be fine.
Yeah, and just not to, I want to improve it right now, make it easiest for you to get it done, because I know there's a pinch of time, and I know these are sometimes delicate things that we can't control. And, but I just, for the public knowing about it, I just find that important. So however we need to do it, whether it's the upcoming or the following one that works best for,
It has to hit this upcoming council meeting for us to be, the
Yeah.
project be moving forward for LTAC.
So we have to approve it for in this meeting.
No, I'm
No.
sorry. At the upcoming council meeting, council meeting on Tuesday. So on September 3rd, council meeting, that's the date that we have approved by.
And then next Friday it's due.
No.
Correct.
Yeah.
We
The
have to
Friday
have-
after the council meeting.
Thank you.
Correct.
Okay.
We have
Yes.
to have a signed agreement
Sorry,
with
I-
the match to them before the Friday after city council meeting.
Yes.
so the 6th.
I was putting that forward a whole week.
Fourth
and
or
I
fifth.
Okay.
thought,
Okay.
That's not
Yeah,
gonna
they-
work.
I get it.
They have a federal deadline where they make a request
Mhm.
that goes through ITD and then it goes to the federal government and they just don't want to hitch anywhere. And
Okay, so
What's
you
our agenda
want it on the
on-
regular agenda?
Yeah, I think
It'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, we can certainly accommodate.
All right. Thank you.
If it's not a
Oh,
big
I
deal,
do it with
you know,
recommend to approve.
yeah,
Recommend,
recommend to
yeah.
approve, see it on regular.
Yeah.
On regular
Subject to
agenda.
the new
Yeah.
agreement.
Yes,
Yes.
thank you.
subject to
Yes.
the agreement.
Okay. Wow,
Awesome.
good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Next on the agenda is the Idaho Revolving Loan Fund Supplemental Revenue Bond Ordinance.
So reaching back to 2014, so when the city updated and completed the water comprehensive plan in 2012, it identified a number of deficiencies in our water system. A few of those deficiencies meant we did not comply with Idaho Department of Environmental Quality regulatory standards. So one of which was you had to be able to take off your highest producing well offline and be able to meet your peak domestic demand. And well 9, as you know, we've had experiences of well 9 going down, and it required us to do curtailments and irrigation restrictions. So we were not compliant with that requirement at that time. The comprehensive water system plan also identified that our boosted stations, so there are some higher elevation areas that we serve with water. The booster stations, when they were constructed, were not sized to accommodate fire flow in those areas. So while it could provide the domestic flow demands, it could not meet the fire flow demands. The city normally, if you're going to issue a revenue bond, which is typically what you'd issue for a utility improvement where you're pledging future revenues to repay that debt, normally you would have to go to an election of the people in order to be able to incur debt. That's pretty much the standard in Idaho. The alternative to that is you can seek judicial confirmation from the court system to declare this is an ordinary and necessary expense. And traditionally, if it's related to your inability to comply with a regulation, that's generally viewed as being ordinary necessary. If it's you have just failed to maintain your system or it's just general system upgrades, that's not a regulatory compliance issue, you're rarely going to obtain judicial confirmation. So the city went through that process in 2014 to allow us to incur debt and issue revenue bonds on the water system to pay for those improvements. After that, we then sought a state revolving loan fund, which is a low interest construction loan from the state of Idaho, the DEQ administers to fund those improvements. At that point in time, at the judicial confirmation, it was estimated that those improvements would cost $4.3 million. Those were values taken from the comp plan that were in 2010 dollars. But that is essentially what we present to the court. That is what we receive from DEQ. And the court really doesn't mind the cost, just the actual improvements themselves, that they are mandatory required regulatory improvements. So the city received an initial $4.3 million loan from DEQ. And those improvements were completed about in 2019. So I recall it was 2019 into early 2020 when we were closing out that first 4.3 million loan. And we started off with kind of the phase 1 improvements that included, drilling the well and improving 3 of the 6 booster stations. And we had not moved into the second phase of the well, which is actually building the well house and the pumps and the controls and the main distributions. And we had remaining booster pumps to complete. By the time we had completed phase 1, we had exhausted all of that $4.3 million that we had received from the state just in the first, essentially half of the improvements. We turned around in 2020 and requested an additional, actually late 2019, requested and if the state had an additional $4.3 million in the state revolving loan fund that we could access to continue to complete these improvements, which the state did have, and the council approved by resolution 2019-22 to apply for and request an additional $4.3 million. We've now, fast forward to 2024, we've fully completed all the improvements. Those included the reconstruction of all the booster stations, the full development of well 10 and water main connections for well 10 to tie it into the city's water distribution system. So we are now at the point of closing out that second loan, and it goes from a traditional kind of a construction loan phase where we're getting reimbursed as costs are incurred and then you essentially wrap it up in a permanent bond financing where DEQ ends up being the sole purchaser of those bonds as they manage that program. The term of the bonds will be a 20-year term at a 2.25% interest rate. Those are the same terms that we had on the first $4.3 million. So DEQ was honoring all of that. At the time in 2020, when we were accepting that, we passed essentially a master bond ordinance, and then any issuance underneath that related to the water system improvements would have a supplementary bond ordinance, and that's what's before you today. So the council passed the first supplementary bond ordinance when we closed out those improvements in the first phase. And so now we were back with a second supplemental bond ordinance that is just to wrap up the construction phase of that second 4.3 million and issue permanent bonds that DEQ will purchase on that 20-year 2.25% interest term. So long story, but it's been a long road since 2014. So approximately 10 years now beyond, we've completed all the improvements. We'll have about $8.6 million that we had borrowed to help fund those improvements. The total cost of all improvements is about $13.7 million. So the rest was made up by our own capital accumulations in the water fund. And once this ordinance is improved, then we have a closing scheduled for September 5th, where the bonds will officially close, and then we'll start our amortization, and we will pick up our debt service on this second loan for the next 20 years as well.
Okay.
Julia, you have a fantastic memory, and you walked us through that, and I understood it, but I couldn't recite that.
That's okay. If you have any questions,
exactly.
I am happy to answer them. But
Wow.
And it's
essentially, we've just taken 2 rounds of loans from the low interest loan program to help complete these improvements. And this second round, we've completed the improvements, and it's just to convert it to permanent financing. So
That's happy news. It just took, that was a lot.
yeah.
yeah, I don't have any questions personally. I don't know if anyone else.
As an ordinance, this will need to be on the regular agenda.
Yeah,
So we can put it on the regular agenda and recommend for approval?
yeah, I would.
Of ordinance under suspension rules requiring.
Yep. Nothing else. We get
Sounds
to
good.
hear Bill
I feel
do
like
all
I
that
just bought a
again.
house.
Right? And I'm gonna have to
Where
sign
do
like
I- do I
18
have to sign
papers
it?
right now.
I need your credit card.
Great.
All right.
All
Thank you.
right, next.
This one's gonna be a little easier, I think.
Yeah,
Kind
okay,
of.
this one, yeah.
This is a little awkward
Okay.
because it's my position we're talking about. So it's a little weird.
I think,
Um,
okay, yeah, next on the agenda is city supervisor title amendment ordinance.
So reaching back in history, back in 1959, the city created a new position by code that was kind of deemed this administrative assistant for the city of Moscow. The position, as described at that time, had a lot of the same responsibilities that the city supervisor position has today. The first individual that was appointed to that position happened in April 6th of 1959, shortly after passage. I'm sorry, no, that was May 14th. That was after the passage of the ordinance on April 6th, creating that position. Claire Ingram was the first individual to hold the title of city supervisor and was also the city treasurer at that time, appointed to that position. Later, the city did update city code, did officially change the title of the position to city supervisor in city code. But it is a bit of an antiquated title. It's not one that you see very commonly. Actually, there's no other individual in that capacity in the state of Idaho that holds that title. Actually, the cities of Pullman and Moscow were kind of the two that held on to that title for a while. I think it was just because of proximity cities, and John Sherman was city supervisor and Gary city supervisor. And then when, about halfway through Adam Lincoln's time here, Pullman changed it to city administrator. And that is really the most common title for that position really in the state of Idaho and nationally. So I've been talking with the mayor about changing that title just because city supervisor is a little bit odd, and oftentimes you spend a little bit of time explaining what it is that is, where people are a little bit more accustomed to city administrator or city manager. City manager is a very different title. It is actually a different form of government in Idaho. There are only 2 cities that have a city manager, where you would have just a elected council, then the council among themselves nominates and elects a mayor. And then the city manager has many of the same powers and responsibilities as mayors do in the state of Idaho. So right now, essentially, it's McCall and Twin Falls are the 2 cities that are left in Idaho. Lewiston was in that form, as you may recall, and they voted to change it back to a strong mayor form of government, mayor council form of government here a couple of years ago. So not to confuse administrator with manager, because they're very different things. So we did prepare 2 ordinances, the first of which would amend Title II, Chapter 4. That is where the appointed officers exist as in Title II. Chapter 4 is related to the city supervisor, and would just change the title. It doesn't change any of the duties or responsibilities. It does necessitate changes to the deputy city supervisor positions that are also listed as appointeds. You'll see in the ordinance, it does make some more extensive changes in that section because that was very prescriptive to kind of 3 deputies with certain areas of responsibility. And I wanted to create more flexibility in the future as the organization changes and evolves over time for assignment of duties or responsibilities. So it just is modified to the mayor may appoint up to 3 and have duties as assigned at that time. And so that's the first ordinance, is really just to change titles and then a little bit on that deputy city supervisor section. The second ordinance then would just go through city code and amend any references to city supervisor or deputy city supervisor. There are fewer than I thought there would be.
Good.
Thought that'd be a longer project. Actually wasn't that significant. So that'll just go in and clean up all of those references. The ordinance that changes the title, the first one, does have a provision in there that essentially if there are any contracts, agreements, or other documents that reference that title, that it's one and the same. Essentially, as the title changes, those same responsibilities point to that same individual. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council might have.
I'd just like to take recommendations from the staff for what we should call Bill instead. I don't know. We could be creative.
I'm
We
sure
could
that in
come up with
private, they'd be
different
happy to share.
City,
Plenty.
city boss man,
Grand Poobah.
the grand poobah.
Code
Great.
nerd, like.
I think there's plenty out there. Some maybe.
No,
I'm just kidding.
No, I think this is, I mean, for anyone listening now or in the future, this is, from what I've been able to see, and as Bill has clearly outlined, this is pretty typical change
Yeah.
that's happened throughout the state. It's not
Mhm.
like anything. We're not blazing the way. We're just recommending just to be more formalized to meet with what the rest of the state is doing. And it's only, I mean, I know I have the preview here, but when I read it, it's really only a name change. It's not doing anything to pass that. And
Yeah,
and-
virtually any other position, we can change titles at will. This one
Yeah.
just happens to be codified so much that we have to change the
Right.
code.
and so it's just saying kosher in
Yeah.
those bounds. So I recommend approval. I'm
Me
sorry,
too.
I'm not giving you a chance to talk, but recommend approval to bring it on to council. But
I agree.
Okay. Can we
But
put
it
it on
has to be-
consent?
As an ordinance,
Oh,
it has
it's
to be
an
on
ordinance.
regular.
Yep.
Yes, unfortunately.
so put on regular agenda.
All right. Looks like we'll have to buy you a new name tag. All right. Next on the agenda is the school resource officer memorandum of understanding.
So over the last 24 years, the city and the school district have jointly supported an SRO position within the district. Our existing agreement is set to expire at the end of this fiscal year, which is September 30. I've reached out to the district, and both entities are desired to continue that arrangement. The current, it's one officer. It previously was 2. I think during some financial difficulties, the district requested to reduce it down to 1. So that's a level we've been at for some time. The position is shared 50-50 in cost between the city and the school district. And so this largely carries forward the same MOU, same conditions, same terms, updated for any current contractual requirements in the state of Idaho. There were really only 2 changes that were made. One, the prior MOU stated that the payment would be made in 2 installments. But the district for many years has just paid us in 1. So essentially it's still going to be in 2 installments. The first installment will cover the base salary, 50% of that base cost. And then the second installment would be for any overtime expenses that we may incur for the SRO attending or participating in school activities or events. So we haven't charged the district for any of that. I don't think it will be substantial, but we just want to put a provision there that we have the opportunity that should there for some reason be excessive amounts of overtime that we're paying, that we could have the district reimburse us for those expenses at the end of the year. Other than that, for the most part, the agreement is much like it has been in the past. I'd be happy to answer any questions the council may have.
I don't have any questions on that.
I don't
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
It's great.
And I think
This one
something
can
that
go on consent, yes.
All right. So
Let's do
let's
that.
recommend for approval on consent
Yep.
agenda.
Agreed.
Good, thank you.
That's a nice way to end that.
It
We
wasn't
should adjourn.
confusing.
No, it wasn't convoluted.
Mhm.
Great.
All right. You ready to adjourn?
Ready to adjourn.
Anything else, Bill?
Nope, nothing from staff.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.